even though I was 30 jumping out of a hot air balloon, just at that moment where I landed and nailed the world record, I was actually the 8-year-old boy trying to impress my father.
Today's guest is Curtis Rivers, a former Hollywood stuntman turned spiritual teacher and author of The Fearless Path. After breaking physical limits for a living, he began asking a deeper question. What if the real edge isn't danger, but awakening? Today, we explore fear, identity, and what it really means to live aligned with your soul. Curtis, thank you so much for joining. I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. And what an amazing intro. You should do voiceovers. That was incredible. I'd watch it.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you, I always love to start my conversations at the very beginning to really understand people. And your journey is so interesting. So to go from facing fear in all of these incredible stunts to the fear of knowing who we really are. How did you go on this journey? Was there an aha moment?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically a feeling deep within that I wasn't living authentically anymore. And so after little nagging doubts, little nagging voices, little feelings collectively, the aha moment that I go to, really the pivotal moment, was when about 2015, 2016, so not that long ago, like maybe a decade ago, I was invited to do a school talk at my old school that I went to from the age of 11 to 16. My form tutor had been keeping track of my career in the local newspapers and very kindly reached out to me because the old school was about to be knocked down. And he said, Curtis, these kids at the moment, the students are so uninspired, and there's a lot of drug dealing, and the children just have nothing to aspire to. High unemployment in the area. It was a very rundown area that I grew up in, industrial, a lot of poverty. So would I come to the school? And so we concocted a plan, and I pretended to be a local businessman. So I put a suit on rather than turn up as the stuntman with the film jacket and the baseball cap and all of that. Just a bit incognito, turned up, and I had these fake glasses that were just pure glass, no real lenses in them. So I was a bit Clark Kent, kept pushing these glasses up and acting all nervous. And I said to the students, which is kind of true, I've been invited in to share my diary, in my journal of what I was writing when I was your age, because I went to this school and I'd put a slide up of me all geeky, because I was a real geek, in the school blazer with a school tie on, and they start laughing because I look so geeky. And then I said, I know, people laughed at it. And I'm really embarrassed now that I'm here to share this with you, because when I was your age, even from the age of 11, 12, I wanted to be a stuntman. And they start thinking, who is this guy? And I said, I know, I want to be a stuntman. There was a TV show called The Fall Guy, and I used to rush back, and I really wanted to watch that every Friday night. And just the idea of jumping out of planes. And I said, that's another thing. I wanted to be in a James Bond movie, and I wanted to jump out of a hot air balloon with a parachute from very high up in the atmosphere, because I'd seen that in a documentary. And the kids are getting restless, who's this guy? Where's this going? And I say, but, I see you all laughing, and that's okay. My parents laughed as well, and my siblings and my school friends. I was teased a lot, but hey, I didn't give in, and this is what happened next. And then the lights dim, and on comes this video of me doing stunts in movies, and then I'm in a James Bond film fighting James Bond on the silver screen. And then it fades up to me stood on the edge of a hot air balloon basket, and then I step off from high in the atmosphere,
My
break a world
God.
record, and you see a little
Wow.
montage of me on talk shows. And then the lights come back up, and you can hear a pin drop. I've got their attention, So this was the first of many talks, and a side career that then became me doing motivational speaking and inspirational speaking, and eventually transformational speaking as a coach and a life coach. So the pivotal moment, going back to your question, a week after that, I went back to my day job, if you like, and went onto a film set, and we were recreating an historic sexual assault. And it was this scene where, the Me Too movement, it was based on fact, but it was a dramatization. And we had to do this scene, and it was very grim. It wasn't that graphic, but just the nature of what we were portraying was a violent attack in this actor's trailer set in the 70s. So my job that day, I have to bring realism and keep everybody safe. It was a closed set, bit of nudity, and it was just very, very uncomfortable. And as I drove home that night, I just felt so low compared to just a week before. A week before, I'd felt moved close to tears on the stage. There was something flowing through me, beautiful, I just felt aligned. Something was flowing through me. I was in the right place. I was doing what I was meant to be doing, and I was helping and sharing and caring and living from a place of love and kindness, which is the real me.
Mhm.
But when I was back into my day job, a job that I'd got tired of many, many years previous, I was now recreating violence. And I thought, gosh, what a difference in a week. That's my contribution today to the world, this low vibrational kind of scene that somebody somewhere is going to be excited by versus inspiring these students who hung back to get my autograph and asked for copies of my book. And I heard from the head teacher afterwards that a couple of them had changed their attitude. One girl in particular, who was the popular girl and had been teased for wanting to be an archaeologist, she started to really apply herself in lessons, started to ask about what career path would lead to get into university, to just leave her silly friends behind and follow her heart and become an archaeologist. So you're making a difference. And that's when I thought, no, enough. And I got to, it snowballed to thinking, most of the things I was doing then are violence or kind of negative. Close friends said, oh, I was overthinking, you're doing entertainment. People need to get home and put some drama on, and you're paying service to those people. But I said, yeah, but there's a different way I can apply myself. So I started to do more comedies, thinking my contribution that day is a bit of slapstick. I'm still stunt coordinating, stunt directing. And so I still do a little bit of that now. I have friends in the industry. I did it for 30 years. So I've still got friends who are directors or reach out, first ADs, producers. And if it's aligned and I can fit it around my coaching, which comes first, then I'll pop in and do a day occasionally with some famous comedian or some light entertainment thing. That's fun, but everything else has just drifted away.
Wow. And it's so true because I've had a recent conversation with somebody and it was misaligned. And I felt like I had to get their energy off of me because when you're out of alignment, that energy, it feels heavy and it just kind of takes over. But I want to ask you about fear in particular because it's scary to leave a job that you're very successful at, uh, two-time world record holder at, to pivot and say, okay, I only want to do things that are in alignment. So, how do you overcome, or what advice do you have for people to overcome that fear to stay in alignment, to take the job that's in alignment when the other job might be very lucrative or supporting their family or doing some really good, tangible things for them?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things to unpack. There's first and foremost, I had the advantage of, in a grandiose way, I'd say I mastered fear, but in reality, I just come to terms with the fact that fear can be a nervous system response, the fight or flight, the reptilian brain. That can be just something that a survival mechanism that we can turn to our advantage. Come to recognize that and kind of thrive on that before I take that. Adrenaline sharpened my focus. I do certain breathing techniques just to calm the nervous system down, become aligned, ultra focused. And those are tools I teach business people now. Whether you're going on stage, you've got a presentation, or something's just getting on top. So there are breathing techniques that I learned to calm the nervous system for that old part of the brain. But people don't realize there's way more to fear than that. The fear of missing out, the fear of not being accepted in a friendship group or a work group, the fear of ridicule. There's so many like nuances and facets to this. And all of those are just old stories we tell ourselves. These are all subconscious beliefs. And that was one of the early interests of mine when people would say, you've done all of these things, you're the most unlikely stuntman, because I was the geeky kid. And yet I became the sportsman. I was scared of heights, yet I jumped out of hot air balloons at 30,000 feet. And, I wasn't the tough kid. I was a bookworm, and yet I became a martial artist. And what makes it different? So I started to explore that. And that's when I got into mindset. And I went away. I don't do things by half. So I went away, didn't just read books on NLP, for instance. I became an NLP practitioner, qualified practitioner. And each thing I took out, I became an instructor in and studied it, And that's when I learned about the workings of the subconscious, how you can rewire and flick switches in hypnosis in there and then bring somebody back around and just their life transforms. So I see fear as something that you can navigate. So that's the first part of that this gut feeling that you've got this fear, this fight or flight. That's normal. You've been doing this for years. That's your normal. When you start to entertain a different thought, your conscious mind is out of whack with your subconscious programming. So you've got that cognitive dissonance, which makes you feel sick and nervous and sleepless nights and worry and all of those things. The worst thing you can do in that situation is to step back into your comfort zone, because then you just replace in your conscious mind that old pattern and nothing changes. If you stay in that, what I call the wobble zone, if you stay there and do certain exercises there and reinstill that, it's only about 30 days, daily action, and then that's accepted by your subconscious now as the new programming, and everything around you starts to change. That wobble zone dissipates, opportunities start to land, and you just ease into it. So that's the biggest part is the psychology of fear and dealing with that. That's what I go through with my clients. But also, firstly, it's never too late to change. That's a big one I get. Yeah, but I've just spent 2 decades doing this. I'm good at what I do. And yeah, but you're miserable. Not true, but like, do you want to do this for another 20 years? Absolutely not.
Right,
Okay.
right,
So how do we make that transition? You don't have to get up one morning and hand your notice in or quit your business or whatever that might look like. There's an interim where you can dip your toe, you can do some retraining, you can start taking clients outside if you're in that sort of arena on top of your day job. You can become part-time and mix the two. When one replaces the other, you can step back and then you can build on that. And once you start that journey and see the chalk and cheese difference between doing the regular job that's miserable and then the new more alignment, that just flows effortlessly, then you
right.
know where you want to be. You've made the right choice.
Absolutely. Talk to me about some of those exercises in the wobble zone that you give to your clients. What are some of them that our people listening could start doing and implementing today?
Well, I talk about things like affirmations. There's nothing new to this. Anything that's the subconscious mind, because that's what we're feeding daily. Anything that can accept as reality, because the subconscious mind doesn't understand have or have not or good, bad, or indifference. So we talk about framing, if somebody's, I feel ill and they say that repeatedly, that's the programming, and their immune system won't be running very highly, for an example. Whereas just a simple reframe of like, oh, I don't feel fit and healthy today. I'm not at my physical prime today. I don't, they can mean the same thing, but the subconscious hears health, prime, fitness, rather than, it's a life at ease rather than dis-ease. So first of all, we look at the language of just be careful of what you're saying, your self-talk, the way you speak, and first and foremost, spin that into being a positive and catch yourself saying those things. And like, oh yeah, I do. I get that with my clients all the time. I'll listen carefully and make a little note and then mirror that back to them. Did I say that? You did. Yeah, watch it back on the replay. Oh, you have to and then keep catching them. And by the time they finish their journey with me, typically spend 8 weeks with clients on a journey from being really stuck to unstuck and experiencing their peace and freedom. By the end of that journey, then they're no longer talking like that. So being mindful of our thoughts, which create our feelings, which create our actions, as you know, and anything to help that. So visualizations, vision boards, exercises, looking through slides that affirm the direction you're going, but done in such a way where you're doing it in the now. So rather than I'll be so happy when I live in that sunny place with the palm trees, it's I'm so happy and grateful to live in this beautiful sunny place that I love, and to close their eyes and imagine the swaying of a palm tree and really feeling that gratitude. And this is great. I just love where I live. And through repetition, like I say, not long, the scientific experiments have proved that the brain aspect, the synaptic gaps, take around about 30 days. And that's been tested to destruction again and again. If somebody stops, maybe like, say, 2 weeks in, after 14 days, it takes a further 30 days to rewire the synaptic gaps. So I have like a tracker, to work with clients and monitor that. It's got to be daily. Don't skip a day. They're very mindful of like deep breath, and we're going to start this and we're going to do these actions every day for 30 days. And I hold their hand through it. We monitor it and we create that kind of like a streak. If anyone's learned a language and you want, or something like that online, and you want to keep that streak going, oh no, I nearly forgot today, and get that kind of energy behind it and do it every day. Affirmations we lay over those images that they read aloud. Like I just said, I'm so happy and grateful to be thriving and healthy and successful. And so we go through that, that's soaked up. So we try and involve all the senses, we're speaking, we're hearing, and then we're sensing, close our eyes. I do recordings and hypnosis sessions so they can lay back and immerse themselves in that. So that's all about reprogramming the subconscious mind to keep them okay in that wobble zone until that dissipates and it's no longer the wobble zone. It's their new paradigm shift.
Awesome. So let me ask you, since you have or have had a lot of different clients that you've helped on this journey, is there any red thread or is there any similarity that you keep seeing that's like a reoccurring theme that people keep going through?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the first one that comes to mind, which may seem unrelated, but it really is a lack of self-worth. There's some work to be done early days, because this whole finding purpose, going back to their true nature, isn't something that we find outside of them. It's stripping away the armor of protection that they've been gradually building up over the years. And slowly and carefully we're unpacking that. It's like they're on a journey and they've been carrying rocks in a backpack and they haven't known. Sometimes I'll invite them to take that rock out, and doesn't that feel better? Oftentimes I'm gently removing it while they're not even looking, and lightening their backpack, lightening their load. So when it comes down to that and you get to the basis, I do find, I'd say 95% of my clients have a limiting belief around self-identity and self-worth. Somewhere deep down, at some point, they feel they're not worthy. The often successful people that I work with who've done okay to the outside world, and that feels kind of worse for them because, they feel guilty sometimes for, being ungrateful. They feel that, what other people wouldn't do to be where I am. I look successful. I have the house, the car, I have the vacations, but I'm absolutely miserable. I'm actually a bit depressed. It's all an act, and it gets more and more exhausting. And I've been there and I've walked that tightrope.
Right, right.
And but behind all that is, a limiting belief of a lack of self worth. That's behind it all.
That's so sad. Um, I want to pivot for a second, if that's okay, and I want to talk about your books. I want to talk about the seven paths to freedom. Talk to us about what those paths are.
So they come in the form of, so Seven Paths to Freedom, and that was later released as the Fearless Path, an abridged version for the American audience. It's it's about a journey up a sacred mountain. So there's a fictional element, which is heavily based on real life, but I've condensed decades of learning into a single journey that in the book takes 7 days. So I'm climbing an ancient mountain. Every night I've got a guide, very wise Merlin type figure who's imparting all this knowledge on me. And every night I get to a temple or monastery type resting place. And I reflect on what we spoke about during that day and think, you know what, they might be onto something. So if we're talking about visualization on that trip, then I'll reflect and think, yeah, Pierce, the name of the guide, Pierce might be onto something there, because when I was younger and I wanted to be a stuntman, I surrounded myself in my bedroom as a child with images of stuntmen and stunts and daring deeds. And I imagined myself on that film set. I'd watch videos behind the scenes, and there was a longing and then an excitement as I got started the training that was going to be me soon. And had that just remained a longing, that keeps things away actually, because that's kind of scarcity mindset. But there was a definite shift of excitement of that is actually where I'm going. I'm qualifying. I've got my black belt in there. I'm skydiving. I've got my wings for that. And this is happening. I'm going to be on that film set soon. And the psychological effect of that. And in many senses, the holistic, otherworldly sense, law of attraction, the universal laws at play in terms of me, what I'm transmitting as I'm thinking these thoughts, as I'm holding them in my heart and transmitting that energetically so that I then take action on that, aligned actions, which is the absolute key to everything I've ever done. The same recipe was applied to becoming a stuntman, to breaking world records, winning film awards, writing books, all things that seemed unlikely if you knew me, but happened anyway because I applied this formula, which is something I teach my clients. So the book, it takes the form of 7 key lessons. It's read one lesson a day, one chapter a day, and it's looking at all of these things. It's introducing the subconscious mind, as we spoke about, which is like an iceberg, the conscious bit just sticking up above the water, but the infinitely superior and powerful subconscious below the surface, making up the bulk of our mindset. So it explains that. And it goes into, like I say, visualization, talk about the power of the mind, affirmations, aligned actions, and there's key lessons all that way so that the the reader can take action, do a little exercise, reflect, and start doing the inner work as they're reading the book, so that by the end they have a whole different mindset on the subject.
So you had said something earlier, and I just keep thinking about it. And I know I had a different question, but I want to go back if you don't mind. You had mentioned that a lot of your clients were suffering from self worth issues. And it's a shame, but I feel like it's so prevalent in society and with people. And we don't think we're good enough for X, Y, or Z, or we feel guilty if we are successful because we feel like imposter syndrome. We shouldn't be there because we're not good enough. So, as a friend, as a mother, as a daughter, what can I do or what can our listeners do to raise the next generation to not have this feeling of low self-worth, to feel better about who they are so that they don't have to go through this pain?
Yeah, it is tricky, and it is so prevalent. And dare I say it, society and technology. We had computers, you know, 10 years ago, ostracizing children running up from school to playing out with their friends, going to look at a screen in their bedroom. That's now in their hand as they look at, a phone screen, do the same thing, and they're chatting electronically. And AI, of course,
Does
uh,
it
I'm reading more and more how school children are seeking solace with AI for advice to replace the parent who's, absent or, not there. So there's all sorts of pieces to the puzzle. Oftentimes you've got parents running a business, to make their child's life better, but the balance is out of whack, and I see that quite a lot because I'm working with entrepreneurs a lot. And it's a tricky conversation to start, but we have to go there. We do everything like that. We don't leave a stone unturned, and that can be feelings of guilt because subconsciously they know. It's like a father can work extra hard when the children are young because it's hard work, and he'd rather be at the office than dealing with all that
Mm.
drama at home. S- Officially, I'm sorry, honey, I've got to work late. I've got this meeting, but I'm going to get that promotion. And on a certain level, he's hiding and he's running away, and he knows that deep down. And there's a little bit of guilt. And you can not just the man, that can be a role reversal if there's a
Sure,
stay
of
at home
course.
husband. It can be the executive. woman working doing the same thing? Or maybe they're both successful and they put their children into education, private schooling, they've got nannies. And there's just an element there of we're doing this to give them the better life, but are they really? Or sometimes there's an element of replaying old patterns because they're children and of a parent or parents who lived like that. So it's very sort of multi-layered. So the obvious, straightforward answer is to limit screen time, because without screen time, then there isn't AI being their best friend. They're not exposed to awful, pornography and people masquerading, like grooming gangs and people pretending to be who they're not. And, it's a tricky world to navigate, right? So as parents, like step one would be to limit that. It's easier said than done, right? I've taken a phone off a
Much
teenager and
easier said.
they've got to burn a phone from a friend, or it's an addiction, that.
Right, it is.
But behind all that, a shoulder, an arm around a shoulder and telling them that you love them, they're seen, and it's difficult because as a parent, that's what I did, and you can still see issues, with children who've. Uh, I was never told that by my father, for instance, that he loved me. So a lot of my lack of self-worth growing up, even though I was 30 jumping out of a hot air balloon, just at that moment where I landed and nailed the world record, I was actually the 8-year-old boy trying to impress my father. And like, hello, I'm here to be seen. I didn't
Right,
realize
right.
that until much later, till I got to about 40, doing a lot of this inner work that like,
Mhm.
gosh, that was, and it never worked, but I wasn't to know, but I was playing out a lack of self-worth. So
Right.
I've got mixed feelings on that, because had I had a father who said I was the best thing ever and I can be or do anything I want, and aren't you great? And if he exaggerated my achievements, and if I came third in a race, he said it's not about the winning, it's about the taking part. You're brilliant, and he displayed the third place trophy. Would I have became a Hollywood stuntman and been admitted into the Hollywood Stuntman's Hall of Fame, even though in English it's quite rare? Would I have had the film awards and the accolades? I don't know that. Possibly not. So it's a double-edged sword. When I was struggling in my stunt training, I definitely recall hearing my dad's voice saying that I would never amount to anything, that I was a
Oh,
waste of space.
oh
And
God.
and that made me dig deep. On them days where I'd had a difficult grading, say, in a martial art, and I didn't get the next belt up, and it's going to be another 3 months before the next grading. There were times, I'm a human being, where I'd think, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. It's so
Mhm.
difficult, and they keep making it more and more difficult. It used to be a green belt as the qualification needed for admittance onto the British Stunt Register. Then it became a brown belt, and they were talking about first down black belt. The goalposts were forever moving. It was costing a fortune. I didn't have a lot of money. So there were days I felt like giving up, but then I would hear my father say those things in my head and think, no, I can't stop now. I've been doing this X amount of years. He would love that, to see me. I told you so. Go and get a job in a factory. So yeah, that kept me going. So it is tricky to be. I've done the polar opposite. Told my kids every day that I loved them. Been the present father, reading the stories, and still had them when they got to their late teens kind of turn around and say, "What do you know, Dad? What have you done with your life?"
Gosh, I think we
So
all
it's
get
like,
that.
yeah, it's a teenage thing, right? You get
It
hormones and stuff.
is.
So between all of that, I think, my door is always open for a chat. I know that that the penny will drop. They'll feel very embarrassed about some of the things they've said when they realize, when they get out there into the big
Oh,
bad world.
sure.
And, you know, they 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 know they're loved. So that any lack of self-worth, it's not just from the parents, of course, it's their peers, isn't it?
Mhm.
And things like the fakeness of social media is a challenge. These days it's TikTok. Not so long ago it was Instagram. People paying for coach travel, quickly jumping into business class for some photographs, holding a champagne flute up and then getting turfed out by the attendants. And it's all over their social media. Hashtag off on the holes, off on vacation, and it's so fake. And I see it everywhere I go.
Yeah,
And
it is.
there's no substance to that. But, that's kind of what people are aspiring to do. And AI, the fakery about people's looks, the plastic surgery,
Sure.
In England right now, they're getting younger and younger with the Botox and the lip fillers. They've all got, what we call the fish pout.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a good look, but it's popular, and it's all
Mhm.
people trying to fit in, struggling to find their place in the world. And, what they really need is somebody to put their arm around them, tell them they're beautiful just as they are, absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
And you don't need all of that. In fact, you'd stand out so much more, if you're trying to appear attractive to attract the boyfriend, say, you'd stand out way more by being different. And to be different, be yourself, because there's only one of you. So be yourself, be
exactly.
unique, and you will just shine.
I love the story that you told in the beginning and about how your talk helped that girl, the popular girl, study archaeology and find her courage. But I want to ask you about what you learned. What was your biggest takeaway from your career being a Hollywood stuntman? What was the thing that you walked away with and said, wow, I learned that? Maybe it's just I learned I can conquer fear, or what was it for you?
I think I'd go back to what we were speaking about earlier, about that there was a mindset angle to fear. You know, there's a misconception when I meet people like, oh, really? You're a stuntman? I would never have guessed, So you're a daredevil then, an adrenaline junkie. And I say, no, I'm actually the polar opposite. I can't stand that feeling of nausea or dry throat, or I don't like the feeling of being frightened at all. And I'm a human being. And I've done a lot of spiritual development and inner work, so I've dropped my ego years ago. So I can admit that, of course I get frightened if I'm up on a height or I was going to do that. Of course I was frightened. Well, there are techniques to bypass that, or to soak up the positive attributes of that, like we spoke about, that fight or flight. Feel that adrenaline surge, know what it is, channel out, breathe through it, calm the heart rate down, and breathe, and then suddenly this laser focus kicks in. And for that moment, there is no fear. When they 3, 2, 1, when they shout action, you step off that building, or they light you on fire, or you hit that accelerator. There's just pure concentration. There is no fear in that. And then that's something that can be applied anywhere in life, on a first date, or going to do a talk, or anything, a job interview. You can take them skills with you. So the fact that that was controllable, that would be a biggie that I took away. And then more so
Yeah.
from that, all them fears we spoke about, the fear of not fitting in, the fear of
Mm.
being judged, what will the neighbors say? What if, coming up with these things that aren't even real, you're projecting into the future instead of living in the moment, in the now. The fact that they're, controllable too, and you can mitigate all of that. And once that's gone away, you can like really thrive and live an authentic life.
I love that you freely admit that you were scared because so many people, especially, and I'm going to generalize and I'm going to say men, like to pretend that they're not scared. And I just love the fact that you're so authentic and so honest and so raw, and that you say, no, yeah, I was scared. But I want to ask you one final question, if you don't mind, because it is the five flavors of happiness. So I always like to ask guests, how has the definition of happiness changed for you over time? And what is happiness for you now?
Say, at the risk of giving you a corny answer, but just sincere, I used to think happiness lived outside of myself. And so there was the outward pursuit of pleasure, sensation, experience, whether that was through an extreme sport that I kept going after I qualified, like hang gliding or parachuting, that kind of thing, or whether that was international travel, which I still love. But I gain happiness and pleasure from those things. But now I understand actually the happiness is within. I say this frequently. I went through a really dark phase, like less than a decade ago, where everything spiraled out of control. I suffered from depression, being in the wrong job and living inauthentically, like a deep, deep depression, which was difficult to find a way out of. And that led to a divorce, and then that led to bankruptcy. So it sounds like a bad thing. It was the best thing that ever happened. To be at the lowest place you can be, the only way you can go is up. And so
Mm.
the mechanisms that I use to get out of that are partly what I teach people. And I've definitely been there. You couldn't get any lower than, metaphorically staring down the barrel of a gun and losing everything. I'd made millions and I lost everything, not a penny to my name. And I rebuilt from that. It's not that long ago. It's less than 10 years ago. Now, I've since rebuilt my life. I've made the millions back. But more importantly, I've met the love of my life and I've remarried. We've been together going on 7 years now. And I often reflect with her. She travels everywhere with me, like my PA. We travel the world, but we don't need the material trinkets. We have a nice house, nice car, and things like that. We live well, but the simplicity of actually, all I need is a roof over my head, some food in the cupboards, and I'm just very happy because inside I'm happy. I'm in love. I'm happy in what I do. I make a difference to people's lives. I look forward to getting out of bed each day and seizing the day, knowing I'm helping people. And it feels good. And I'm justly rewarded by that. And the more money that flows to me, the more I can pay forward and help other people. And the more, as you know, the more you help people, the more it flows back to you like a big infinity symbol. So I'm in a really, really good place. Happiness is deep, deep within, and you don't need any external trinkets to find that happiness.
Curtis, thank you so much for spending time with me today and with our viewers. This was such a fabulous conversation. And guys, thank you so much for listening. And I'm going to leave all Curtis's links in the description below. Thank you, everybody. And if this conversation resonated with you, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. Thanks, guys.